Hello everybody and welcome to CaiKeys. I hope today's going to be a fun episode because I've been shit on. So as you all know, for £650 you could get a Toyota Yaris, or for just a few cheese and onion pasties more, is to say 700 cheese and onion pasties more, you could get this, the Alfa Romeo 159 2.4 JTD. Right, here we are. Check engine. Alrighty. Yep, looks like there's an engine in there to me, and it's a 5-cylinder. I've got to say it's not the prettiest engine Alfa Romeo have ever designed, have they? Also, in true Italian sadistic tradition, transversely mounted, and you keep having to replace these. The drive belt interval is ridiculously low, 5 years or about 70,000 miles. So good luck contortionisming your hand between this. There's about an inch of clearance, give or take. Take a lot. But I must say, in comparison to all the other diesels that I've reviewed, Jack's older C5, my Rover 75, this is just a remarkably smooth and well-balanced engine. I'm not going to try and balance a penny on here, because it would still fall off, but as a diesel goes, fantastic. So, here we are in the Alfa Romeo 159. Shaky car park introductions aside, we are now behind the wheel. So, a little bit of backstory to this car. This is Jack's brand new purchase. You might remember Jack from the Citroen C5 video. That was his previous daily driver, and unfortunately it developed a fair few faults. The alternator was knackered, there were some wheel bearing issues, and the suspension developed a really funny issue where the front would remain completely high up, the rear would remain a little bit too low, and it would only ever properly focus at around 70 miles an hour. It would come back down to normal. So the repairs were going to be a little bit more than the car was worth. So, very logically, using proper car guy logic, Jack decided that the best thing to do was to get shot of the Citroen, but instead he'd purchase an Alfa Romeo. Yeah. This is the Alfa Romeo 159 though, and it's perhaps not so much deserving of the traditional Alfa Romeos always break down stereotypes which have been thrown around all over the place for the past few decades. Gone were the stories of horrific Alfa Romeo rust, if you disregard the rear subframes, which, yeah, stay clear of that. And these Alfa Romeos, the 159, use General Motors petrol engines and Fiat JTD diesel engines. Unfortunately, the old Alfa Romeo V6 Busso, which everybody loved, with obviously its chrome exhaust manifold and its tremendous sound, that had unfortunately gone to be replaced with what was essentially a fancy Vauxhall engine. There's a lot I don't like about General Motors vehicles, but I'm trying not to let that cloud my judgment. So anyway, like I said, this has a Fiat JTD 2.4. It's a 5-cylinder, as I did say in the introduction. And I've never driven a 5-cylinder diesel so far. It's just a matter of fact that I've only driven so many cars, so I can only make so many comparisons at this point. But I haven't. This is the first 5-cylinder diesel I've driven. I've driven my fair share of 4-cylinder diesels though. And one thing I must say, I didn't know a diesel could be so bloody refined. It feels fantastically balanced. Every other 4 Series diesel I've driven has had the unfortunate issue of sounding rather agricultural. Rather tappety engines, you can hear the injectors working overtime, and they're just very unpleasant. what they deliver in fuel economy, they don't really deliver in miles per gallon. Mileage high, mileage low. This is different. Now, I have a 330D 6-cylinder to review next, and if it's anywhere near as good as the diesel in this, I'll be blown away. So the 2.4 litre JTD, which appears to be, if you're looking for a diesel 159, the engine to go for, really. The only one I hear properly discussed. Approximately 210 brake horsepower. The downside of that is for a diesel, fuel economy is really not so good. Average consumption here on the trip meter is showing 32.6 miles to the gallon, which is, for a diesel, that's rather poor. But I've heard that some people say that, you know, mid-40s is possible if you drive it like your nan. Now, in contrary to driving it like your nan, this vehicle comes with a turbo gauge. So it kind of encourages you to drive it like a proper Italian car. And I must say, for a 5-cylinder, the one thing what really impressed me when I first drove this car, because I've been driving this thing for about an hour now, me and Jack and Ethan got into it, and we were driving towards the countryside to take some introductory shots. And I put my foot down a little bit, and I was so impressed at the noise that this vehicle makes. It doesn't sound agricultural. I'm not going to say that it sounds as good as a Busso V6 or a V8 or anything like that, and at the end of the day it is a diesel, so you know, a little bit of clatter is to be expected, but I'm so impressed. Road holding on the 159 is fantastic. The issue that lots of critics had with the 159 when it came out is that its curb weight was far too heavy, and I believe that this is topping the scales at about 1,750 kilograms, proper number somewhere around here. I must say, in a car such as this, an estate, a Grand Tourer almost as it were, because this is what it is, it's a comfortable, refined vehicle for long distance, doesn't really matter too much. One of the issues is that Alfa Romeo used this same platform for a variety of their vehicles, the 159, but also the Alfa Romeo Spider and the Alfa Romeo Brera. Unfortunately, this platform is rather heavy, and one of the main criticisms is that in a vehicle such as the Spider, such as the Brera, which is you know, the kind of car that you want to push a little bit more, it encourages you to, weight was an issue. With this, I'm yet to really have got it to understeer. I feel that you're probably never really going to be going fast enough to properly break traction in this car, to properly end up careening into a lamppost. The Rover 75 had a similar criticism of being a bit too heavy, and I feel that did suffer with understeer a little bit more than the 159. Just remain planted. Second gear, put my foot down around that corner, which is something that you shouldn't ideally do if you're actually not looking to die, and nothing. Fantastic. 18-inch alloys on this Alfa Romeo 156, and I must say it soaks up the bumps really well. I think that's not so much due to the suspension, which seems quite stiff. Body roll is negligible. I think it's more due to the fact that we basically seem to be sitting on a leather trampoline. Just these sumptuous like armchairs with this beautiful tan leather. They're a little bit slippy, but back bolstering is good. Thigh support is sort of caresses my bottom in a pleasing manner. Yes, fantastic. Prices for the 159 appear to be absolutely all over the place. This was actually the cheapest Alfa Romeo 159 in the country, which worked. There were spares and repairs cars for cheaper. There were spares and repairs cars more expensive than this. And so far, Jack's discovered a few problems, but nothing major. There's a check engine light which has mysteriously disappeared, so therefore there's nothing at all wrong with it. And there's also a coolant leak. But I consider that to be a wine dispenser, because this is an Italian car, it has flair. It doesn't leak coolant, it dispenses wine. Spicy, poisonous wine, but wine nonetheless. Turning circle's abysmal, but who cares? Nice Beetle. Or rat rod Beetle. Just briefly want to note that the front end on this is impressively long. It's a beautifully proportioned car, and styling wise it really reminds me of those old shark nose BMWs from the 80s. I believe it was the 6 Series. Just this fantastically imposing front grille. I'm not just saying this because it's an Alfa Romeo. I think that if this car had any other badge, it would still be beautiful. I've heard quite a lot of criticism with the 2.4 litre JTD that's in this, that it feels a little bit down on power. And I disagree, you know. But I'll tell you why it feels very low down on power, or why people think it may. The gearing is incredibly long. First gear is very short, can redline just under 30 miles per hour. That sounds fantastic for a diesel. Second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, sixth gear, they almost feel like cruising gears. I mean, they are. Second gear, 30 miles an hour. Very difficult to read speedometer though, I must say. You can really hear that turbo kicking in, but the engine just feels... It sounds almost muscular, as we were saying, and yeah, you're never going to forgive thinking that this is a straight 6 or what have you, but for a diesel, it's a delight. It's not embarrassing. Put it this way, I put my foot down in the diesel JTD, this 159, and I didn't have to sink down into the seat in embarrassment. Issues to look for if you're going for one of these. I'm speaking for the JTD. I can't really speak for the petrols because I've not driven one, and therefore I've not researched the petrols as comprehensively. But you do have, the main issue appears to be the timing belts on these vehicles. They have a very low service interval. It's approximately 70,000 miles or 5 years. Unfortunately, the timing belts on these vehicles have a habit of jumping, which causes no end of issues. Furious Driving has recently purchased an Alfa Romeo 159, and he really does like these cars. The vehicle which he has purchased has slipped a tooth on the timing belt, although, despite being an interference engine, they are typically fixable. But make sure, if you're purchasing one of these, that there is record that the timing belt has been done. I'm just driving around in this gorgeously styled Italian vehicle through a Bolton council estate. There's something to be said for cinematic juxtaposition here. I don't know what, but there's something. Watching that turbo gauge go up and down is just addictive and very distracting. Forget having iPads on the dash. Ban these turbo gauges, because I could watch it all day. Just that Italian flair. It's honestly completely unnecessary. But Alfa Romeo trying to hit that perfect blend of sportiness and luxury, I think they've made a good choice implementing one. Other issues on these, the ECUs can sometimes stop ECUing. They do have a high failure rate. There's also an issue with the windscreen wipers on these things, in which case they sometimes decide they don't need to work. But that's okay, because you don't need windscreen wipers, right? That being said, stereotypes about Alfa Romeo's unreliability of this gen. Don't want that in. I somehow almost lost control of a front-wheel drive diesel. That's embarrassing. So you'll see I've got a video coming out soon where I was taking some B-reel, and for some reason I looked down at the gear shift to change gear. I've never done that in my life. Although I will have to defend myself. The power steering on this is defective, so it goes from being quite nicely weighted, which I believe is how it's supposed to be, to feeling like you're trying to maneuver an entire building. So the Alfa Romeo 159 was just styled fantastically by Giorgetti Guigaro. Please don't have a go at me, Italians. I cannot speak Italian. I cannot speak any language except Northern. And it's a fantastically styled car. So Alfa Romeo in this era took an awful lot of... I've completely lost my lexicon. Inspiration. Alfa Romeo took an awful lot of inspiration from the 2002 Brera concept, which they revealed in, surprise, surprise, 2002, and that design language, that is to say, this very aggressive, almost shark nose bonnet, which reminds me of the old, I believe, BMW 6 Series coupes with their very sharp, aggressive front. These free headlights flanking either side, and then this almost cockpit-inspired design where all the instruments are angled towards the driver in a massive affront to the passengers who only really get one air vent. Don't matter. This is a driver's car, and it is just fantastically styled. This, I really do believe, is one of the best design cars of the 2000s. I've levelled this criticism on a lot of cars before, but I feel that cars of this age, even when they try to be elegant, they suffered from looking bloated, too large as it were. The Rover 75, which I believe is quite a handsomely designed car, on account of having to be safe and not maul pedestrians in the event of a crash, they happen to be fairly blobby, fairly rounded, and I think that that's something which is to the detriment of a lot of vehicles. Luckily, Alfa Romeo, they designed this car very safely. I think it's got a 4 or a 5-star crash safety rating for the occupants. Pedestrians, poof, doesn't matter, 1 star. You'll die if you're hit by one of these, but it doesn't matter because you'll look fantastic while doing so. What a stunning vehicle. I have a little bit of a vendetta against front-wheel drive cars, and I know it's irrational because really in typical day-to-day driving you're not really going to notice the difference. You only tend to notice them during spirited driving, but I must say there's not really many detriments of it in this car, and I think that's on account of the massive tyres that this thing has. It's got 2 3.5s at the front and rear, and if you look at the car from the back, it has this sort of squat, hunkered down appearance. The tyres are ginormous. So you've got an awful lot of grip, you've got a very heavy diesel engine weighing down on this car, although apparently the V6 is actually heavier than the diesel in this, which is surprising. And the whole thing feels really rather planted. It's very, very wide. You've got these rolled arches, which almost makes the car look like it's got a factory wide body, and its stance is just phenomenal. So, as I said, I'm reviewing a 3 Series next, and a little bit of trivia. The Alfa Romeo 159 is bigger in every single aspect of the 3 Series. It's wider, it's longer, except it has less interior space. And these seats are bloody huge. Rear seat passengers. Look, this is an Italian's idea at Practicality. You've got enough for the illegitimate love children in the back, and you've got enough boot space for your Bible and your priest robes, but that's about it. Practicality is not really this vehicle's strong suit. The road presence, people are just letting us drive past. People are bowing in the presence of the greatness of the 159 Sport Wagon. So, Alfa Romeo, at this time, used a platform called the GM Fiat Premium platform that you don't really tend to get in many other cars. The Alfa Romeo 159 is obviously what I'm in today, is on that platform, in addition to the Alfa Romeo Brera and the Alfa Romeo Spider. This was quite a premium platform, and it doesn't really share many other vehicles in common, like I said. Despite being a collaboration between General Motors and Fiat, it wasn't used for any subsequent Opel Vauxhall vehicles because it was deemed to be too costly to manufacture vehicles on this platform. For a brand such as Opel, which, you know, fairly budget cars, and for GM's other European car company, Saab, it was deemed too expensive to design vehicles on this platform for a fairly low volume manufacturer. Now, having never driven a Saab, that's one of the things that put me off the idea that they're just rehashed Vauxhalls. So I feel that's a shame. Now, the clutch is very, very notchy. It's the kind of thing you get used to, but it feels rather on/off. It kind of, it almost slams. That's not a major issue, it's the kind of thing you'd get used to, but when I first got into the car, that was jarring. So, discussing the transmission, this is an interesting one, and I am going to sound like a little bit of a hypocrite, but this is a General Motors transmission with an Italian gear linkage. Now, the Italians have really pulled their weight here, because I think this gearbox is absolutely fantastic. I've heard a little bit of criticism levelled at it, but this gearbox is very, very notchy. It doesn't feel, very notchy, I'd best describe it as. Almost akin to the Mazda MX-5. Now, this is where I had my criticism with the Mazda MX-5, but I like the gearbox on this. I think the MX-5 gearbox, I've had a lot of commenters tell me that the vehicle probably needed a gearbox service, and that's why it felt notchy, and it wasn't really supposed to feel like that. Perhaps that's the case. This feels precise, but you know exactly what gear you're in. There's no slush at all. Lots of cars I've driven, like Jack's older C5, had this issue where there was an awful lot of movement in the gearbox, and I don't like that. I like a very precise boom, boom, boom. You know what gear you're in. This has it in spades. Fantastic. Ergonomically as well. I first got into this car and my elbows were up here, and I thought, it's got to be adjustable for brake and reach. Look at that. Probably shouldn't do that while I'm driving, should I? It's fantastic. And with the 2.4, if he keeps on top of those belt changes and he services the car at the recommended intervals, it shouldn't really leave him too far out of pocket, and hopefully shouldn't leave him stranded. There's examples of these cars that have gone 300,000 miles and keep on going. Whilst not the most efficient vehicles in the world, they are bloody comfy, styled absolutely phenomenally, have really impressive build quality. The styling still looks current. The interiors appear to wear very, very well indeed. And yeah, I'm very, very impressed by this vehicle. Oh, this is a relay for something? Just carry your spare relays with you. It's Italian after all. Oh my god, the traffic is mad. Oh, this vehicle's Italian and wants you to know. The dials are in Italian, like the RPM. It doesn't say RPM times 1,000 or times 100. It says giri times 1,000. That sounds more French. Giri times 1,000. The water temperature gauge, aqua degrees Celsius, and it's sitting at 90. I have my suspicions that that's a little bit of a dummy gauge, because that should really be fluctuating slightly. It shouldn't stay at a constant 90. Turbo/bar. Gotta say, as an aside, the tan seats are just spectacular. There's a few colours that you have to go for if you're purchasing an Alfa Romeo, and those few colours are red, or red. But I think that we can make an exception for this black exterior with this tan interior, because it is just magnificent. Juxtaposed with this sort of raised aluminium, textured aluminium. It is just a masterpiece. There really isn't much to dislike about this car for the driver. As the passengers, yeah, you don't really have any room. You have some wonderfully comfortable, fantastically padded seats. Just make sure you've got very little legs and you'll be fine. Ergonomics of this are bang on as well. Thanks in part due to this massive adjustability of the steering column. That helps whether you've got tiny little arms and long legs or vice versa. So much adjustability. Seats nicely bolstered, as I previously explained. I don't want my reviews to feel overly positive, because I do try and find little niggles, little bits and pieces that I dislike about this car. But considering the budget that Jack purchased this car for, £1,000, considering the Yaris was £650, this is just marvellous in comparison. Did you just not go anywhere, or did you just stand in the car park for half an hour? So in conclusion, if you are looking for the greatest purchase of your life for about 5 minutes, you can't really go too far wrong with the humble Alfa Romeo 159. Absolutely fantastic styling, very impressive to drive, admittedly a little bit heavy, but absolutely glorious to look at. I think for the cheap price of one of these, don't bother getting one of those expensive ones on Auto Trader you see for £9 grand. Get a cheapo one, ignore the flashing lights on the engine until something goes catastrophically wrong, enjoy your red wine dispenser where your radiator is, and send it. Ignore the horrible fuel economy. It's an Alfa, and I like it. Thank you for watching today's episode of CaiKeys. If you want to see what I think of the BMW 3 Series, that'll be coming soon. It's like this, but not as pretty, but a bit faster. Thank you very much for watching. Catch me in the next episode where I review that, and don't forget your CaiKeys. See you later.